Superman, Batman, what do they all have in common? Everyone knows who they are. Your grandma knows who they are, your dentist knows who they are. You could walk into a gas station at 2 a.m., whisper Batman, and someone behind the beef jerky would nod in quiet understanding. These characters are cultural oxygen. They sell themselves. They don't need explaining. And yet, here I am, sitting down to talk about the DC characters that make people go, wait, that's a real guy? This is not where I envisioned my life going. But alas, content must be made, because for every Superman, there's a movie about a character whose name sounds like it was generated by AI. The kind of character where the trailer drops and the internet collectively ask, is this from DC or did you guys just make this up? And on the surface, it feels ridiculous, like scraping the bottom of the IP barrel, shaking it and seeing what falls out. These aren't household names. These aren't characters with lunchboxes or pajamas. Half of them don't even, vibe. And yet, someone greenlit a movie, hired a director, spent real money and said, yeah, this is cinema. As much as I want to continue to dunk on this topic, there's actually a reason these matter. Comic book movies shouldn't only be about the safest icons imaginable. The weirdos, the nobodies, the who asked for this characters are where studios can take risk, tell smaller or stranger stories, and actually experiment without the weight of $1 billion mascot on their back. These movies aren't about brand recognition, they're about possibility, and sometimes when no one's watching and expectations are on the floor, that's when something genuinely interesting sneaks through. The idea of handing Swamp Thing to Wes Craven in 1982 should have been a slam dunk on paper. This is one of the most inventive horror filmmakers of his era, a guy who thrives on atmosphere, imagination, and pushing genre boundaries, and yet somehow almost none of that inventiveness makes it onto the screen. What we get instead is a miserable slog, dull, disjointed, and embarrassingly cheap looking. Like the movie itself is trudging through a swamp in the same stiff rubber suit it expects us to emotionally invest in. Everything feels compromised, sets look like they were assembled 5 minutes before the camera rolled, action scenes land with a wet thud, and the whole thing has this oppressive sense of creative exhaustion hanging over it. Craven also seems completely torn on what Swamp Thing is supposed to be. Is it a sincere monster tragedy, a straight-faced superhero origin, a schlocky B-movie that knows exactly how ridiculous it is? The film can't decide, so it just floats there, stuck in a weird tonal purgatory where nothing ever fully commits. It's not scary enough to work as horror, not dramatic enough to feel tragic, and not campy enough to be fun. Scenes just kinda happen one after another with no urgency or momentum, as if the movie itself would rather be anywhere else. It doesn't build tension, it doesn't escalate, it just exists. And that's what really kills it. This isn't the kind of bad movie you can laugh with or ironically enjoy. Unlike the sequel, yes, there's a sequel, this one isn't fun bad or charmingly incompetent, it's lethargic. The pacing crawls, the characters are painfully bland, and somehow the central character, the literal swamp monster, manages to be the least interesting thing in its own movie. For a character that should feel mythic, tragic, or at the very least visually striking, Swamp Thing comes off as weirdly lifeless. It's not a disaster you remember, it's a fog you sit through and immediately forget, which actually might be the harsher crime. Okay, I want to say this as straightly as possible. This movie is technically awful in nearly every way that counts. The acting is cranked up to full cartoon mode, the script is absurd, and the tone swings so wildly it could give you whiplash. And yet, it's an actual fun movie. Where the first Swamp Thing felt embarrassed to exist, this sequel takes one look at that energy and does a complete 180, basically saying, oh, you want camp? Good. There's no hesitation, no half measures, just full commitment to being a goofy, low-budget monster flick with zero shame and, against all odds, a surprising amount of charm. That confidence makes all the difference. The movie knows exactly what it is, and instead of fighting its limitations, it weaponizes them. It leans hard into B-movie territory with ridiculous villains, corny one-liners, and an intentionally over-the-top tone that turns what could have been another lifeless slog into something genuinely funny. Scenes aren't trying to impress you, they're trying to entertain you, and that tone puts it miles ahead of its predecessor. The pacing actually moves, jokes land because the movie wants them to, and the whole thing feels like it's having fun instead of apologizing for itself. And honestly, the practical effects are shockingly good. Compared to the rubbery embarrassment of the first film suit, this Swamp Thing actually looks, like Swamp Thing. The monster makeup across the board is a huge upgrade, packed with weird designs and grotesque effects that feel ripped straight out of a Toxic Avenger fever dream. Toss in corny voiceovers, nonstop puns, cartoonishly evil villains, and so many damn unnecessary explosions, and you got camp cinema firing on all cylinders. Is it a good film? No, not even remotely. But is it a fun film? Absolutely, and sometimes that's more than enough. Okay, hold up. How did we go from this to this? Okay, setting aside that baffling concept choice, casting call, and creative gamble that clearly lost big at the table, it's not technically the worst thing ever made, and I say that strictly from a I am laughing at this movie, not with it standpoint, because make no mistake, this thing sucks. It sucks in that spectacular, jaw-dropping, how did this get released in theaters kind of way. The acting is wooden, the script is nonsense, the effects are embarrassing even for the era, and the whole thing feels like a half-remembered Saturday morning cartoon stretched into a feature-length film. And yet, somehow, I had fun. Not because it's good or clever or even accidentally smart, but because it's so unbelievably, laughably bad that it loops back around into entertainment. I genuinely cannot come up with more to say than that. Mostly because the movie itself didn't either. I fear for humanity sometimes. There are bad movies. There are fascinatingly bad movies. And then there's Catwoman, a film so cosmically misguided, it feels like it crawled out of a parallel universe where everyone involved was legally required to misunderstand the assignment. It's not even the kind of bad that inspires rage or laughter. It's the kind of bad that makes you stare at a wall afterward, wondering how a studio with billions of dollars and access to one of the most iconic characters in comics history somehow created this. A movie that isn't just disconnected from Catwoman, it's disconnected from Earth logic. This movie exists. It happened. And we as a species must live with that knowledge. Okay, here we go. Finally, one of my favorite characters, Constantine. Oh, okay, it takes way too long to get going. The first act is a slog weighed down by chunky exposition, muted emotion, and a pace that feels allergic to urgency. This entire movie is table setting with none of the momentum. Like the movie is too busy explaining its rules to remember it's supposed to be entertaining. And then there's Keanu Reeves as Constantine, who made this decision. Where's the blonde hair, the British accent? This isn't Hellblazer so much as John Constantine, but filtered through early 2000s Hollywood vibes. But once it finds its footing, genuinely awesome. The second half locks in and delivers moody, atmospheric visuals, strong supporting performances. Peter Stormare alone is doing absolute work, and some surprisingly weighty themes about damnation, faith, and redemption. Hell is unsettling, heaven is cold, and the moral ambiguity actually lands in a way the opening struggles to earn. It's messy and uneven, but when Constantine works, it really works. It's a deeply flawed adaptation, sure, but still a cool as hell supernatural flick that earns its cult following. Okay, Watchmen. Yeah, it's messy. It's not as deep or as layered as the graphic novel, but even the theatrical cut of Watchmen lands more than it misses. Visually, it's doing the absolute most in a good way. Grimy, hyper-stylized, soaked in slow motion and iconography. It's packed with images that stick with you long after the movie's over. Zack Snyder is firmly in his bag here, for better and worse. But there's no denying the commitment, and the cast is solid across the board, with Jackie Earle Haley absolutely owning Rorschach in a way that's so pitch perfect it almost feels unfair to the rest of the movie. Sure, a lot of the nuance and subtext from the source material gets flattened, and some moments hit harder in theory than they do in actual execution. Themes about power, control, and moral compromise are all present, but not always given the breathing room they need. Still, the ambition is undeniable. This isn't a superhero movie playing it safe or winking at the audience. It's earnestly grappling with heavy, uncomfortable ideas, even when it stumbles, trying to articulate them. It aims high, sometimes overshoots, sometimes face plants, but never feels lazy, and honestly, that counts for a lot. The director's cut reportedly smooths out a lot of the rough edges and lets the story breathe more. So yeah, if you want the full experience, that's probably the version to watch. Jonah Hex is bad. Unequivocally bad. It takes a gritty, genuinely fascinating comic character and flattens him into a half-baked supernatural cowboy movie thing, complete with baffling story decisions, lifeless dialogue, and action scenes that feel like they were edited with a chainsaw and zero supervision. The tone is completely butchered, the lore is mangled beyond recognition, and whatever potential this had gets torched in under 80 minutes. The whole thing reeks of studio panic, rushed pacing, obvious reshoots, and a stitched-together narrative that barely holds itself upright from scene to scene. And yet, it's kinda entertaining. Not good entertaining, but what the hell were they thinking entertaining? The movie is just ridiculous enough to stay watchable, leaning so hard into its own nonsense that it actually stumbles into a weird, dumb charm. It never slows down long enough for you to fully process how broken this movie is. And honestly, that might be its greatest strength. It's a mess. It's a loud, bad, fast, ugly, and shit-filled, confused mess. But it's never boring, and sometimes that alone is enough to keep you from turning it off. Okay, so this is obviously the most popular one that I'm gonna talk about, right? And honestly, I've never fully understand the immense hate this movie gets. Is it good? Fuck no. The CGI is aggressively mid, even by the standards of the time. The tone swings around like it's dizzy, and Ryan Reynolds is just there, doing his best while wrestling with a script that seems actively determined to sabotage him at every possible turn. You can almost feel the movie fighting him whenever he tries to inject personality or charm. But here's the thing, it's not the worst superhero movie ever made. It's not even offensively bad, it's just bad. Unremarkable, forgettable, the kind of movie you finish, shrug at, and immediately move on from, quietly wondering why it's still taking up space in your brain at all. There is no single disastrous element to latch onto, no spectacular failure to gawk at. It just kinda exists, floats by and evaporates the moment it's over. And maybe that's why people hate it so much. Not because it's terrible, but because it's so painfully easy to forget. Finally, the first actually good movie. Joker is an absolute masterclass in character study and atmosphere. Raw, unsettling, and hauntingly intimate in a way that most comic book adjacent films wouldn't dare attempt. Every frame feels deliberate, every moment soaked in tension and discomfort, like the movie is daring you to look away first. It stares straight into the abyss and doesn't flinch, offering something far more psychological, grounded, and painfully human than the genre usually allows for. The world it builds is grimy, claustrophobic, and emotionally detached. A decaying city that feels less like a setting and more like a pressure cooker slowly tightening around its protagonist. Joaquin Phoenix delivers one of the most transformative performances in modern film, full stop. His descent is terrifying, heartbreaking, and disturbingly empathetic all at once. This isn't just a great performance, it feels possessed. Every twitch, contortion, and broken laugh feels intentional, and once he starts unraveling, it's impossible to look away. The score is bone-chilling, drilling straight into your spine, while the cinematography finds an eerie beauty in filth and isolation. There isn't a single moment that feels accidental or wasted. Everything is loaded with meaning, discomfort, and dread. Joker isn't just a great comic book movie, it's a great film, period. Bold, artful, and unapologetically alienating. It plays like a modern tragedy rather than a genre exercise, and that's exactly why it stands out so starkly. It commits to its vision without compromise, and I'm so glad they definitely didn't undermine that by following it up with a shitty, patronizing crap piece that's also a musical. That would have been really embarrassing. So what's the next film on this list? Oh, Folie à Deux is a baffling misfire that somehow manages to misunderstand everything that made the first Joker so powerful. Where the original was a raw, intimate character study, this sequel goes full tilt into theatrical excess, losing all sense of subtlety or grounding. The score is still great, and the musical sequences are actually executed quite well, but that's about the only part of this film that lands consistently. The first hour even flirts with the tension and darkness of its predecessor, holding some promise, but then the final act arrives and wow, pointless, doesn't even begin to cover it. There's no thematic payoff, no emotional resonance, just a limp, overstuffed spectacle with a god-awful ending that somehow manages to drain all the life from a genuinely good movie. Todd Phillips seems far too preoccupied with punishing the audience for liking the first film, as if enjoying Joker was some kind of sin. The tone is utterly confused, the emotional weight evaporates, and what once felt haunting, intimate, and grounded is replaced by forced showmanship. The stakes feel hollow, the spectacle dominates over character, and the subtle psychological horror that made the first one stick in your brain is nowhere to be found. In short, it doesn't just fail to live up to the first film, it actively undermines it, leaving you wondering why it exists at all. And that's it. I could go on some long, heartfelt moral spiel about how being a nobody isn't actually a bad thing, how obscure characters getting their moment on screen actually matters, yada yada yada, but let's be honest, most of these movies suck. This video exists mostly so I could get them off my chest. Truthfully, I just want to watch Iron Lung already. Ah! So until next time, keep watching movies, keep noticing the little details, and remember to form your own opinions.